My stepchildren said they answer only to their biological parents, so I changed the locks, canceled every privilege in my name, and told their father pickup was tonight. No one argued. My stepchildren Bellatrix and Beauregard were 15 and 13. The thing about them is that I had been raising them, primarily, for 6 years. Their biological mother, Persephone, had moved overseas when they were 9 and 7, sending birthday cards, doing video calls twice a month, contributing $0 to child support despite a court order. My husband Augustin had been working a job that had him traveling 4 nights a week. I was the one doing the homework, the doctor's appointments, the school pickups, the groceries. On a Sunday in October, Bellatrix delivered at our kitchen table, with her brother sitting next to her, a speech she had clearly been writing for weeks, that they had talked, that they had decided, as a family unit, that going forward they would only be answering to their biological parents, that I was welcome to live in the house, but had no authority over either of them, that any decisions about their schedules, money, or activities would be going through their father, or, when he was unreachable, their mother in Europe. That, no offense, but I was not their parent. The dumber she thinks I am, the more rope she'll hand me. I didn't argue. I smiled. I said, okay, that's a clear position. I respect that you've thought about it. I'd like you to put it in writing. Both of you. Sign it. Bring it to me by 6 p.m. I want to make sure I understand exactly what you're asking for. They were delighted. They did it. By 5:47 p.m., I had a signed document from both stepchildren stating they did not consider me a parent and would be answering only to their biological mother and father. I made 3 phone calls that evening. The first to my husband Augustin, who was on a layover in Denver, telling him exactly what had happened and reading him the document, telling him I supported his children having clarity about their relationships and that I would be complying with their request. That effective tomorrow morning, I would no longer be doing parental tasks for either of them, that he would need to make alternate arrangements, that I loved him, that this was not about him, that this was about Bellatrix and Beauregard finally being given exactly what they had asked for. The second call was to a locksmith, scheduling for 7 a.m. the next morning, new deadbolts. Since I was the only adult in the house and was responsible for our security, and the children had informed me they did not answer to me, I was not comfortable with them having keys to my home while I traveled to and from work. The third call was to my own attorney, just a heads up. By 9 p.m., I had done a few more quiet things, canceled my Costco membership, canceled the streaming services that were on my account, canceled the family phone plan that was on my account, and listed my stepchildren as lines I paid for, canceled the orthodontist payment plan that was being auto-paid from my bank account, called the gym, where my stepson had a youth membership on my card, and froze it, removed both stepchildren as authorized drivers on my own car insurance. All of this wasn't vindictive. All of this was simply, I am not your parent. I will not be financially responsible for you. Your biological parents will be, per your written request. The next morning, the locks were changed at 7:30 a.m. I wasn't at home when the kids got back from school. I was having dinner with a friend. My husband called at 4 p.m. from Denver to say his kids had been locked out. My husband called me, calm, quiet. Magnolia, what's going on? Augustine, I want you to know I love you. I want you to know I love your children. I also want you to know I've been doing this job unpaid for 6 years, and they told me to my face yesterday that I had no authority. They put it in writing, so I'm respecting their wishes. I'm not their parent, per them. So I'm not housing them, feeding them, transporting them, or paying for them, per them. Tonight is your pickup. You'll need to fly home or arrange for them to stay somewhere safe until you do. My husband was quiet for a long time. Then he said, Magnolia, I am so sorry. I am taking the next flight home. Please don't go anywhere. I love you. I will be fixing this. Augustin flew home that night. His children stayed with his sister, my sister-in-law Catalina, for 2 days. When Augustine was home, the 4 of them, Augustin, Bellatrix, Beauregard, and Catalina, had a long, painful conversation. The 4 of them, not me. I stayed at a hotel deliberately while it happened. 2 days later, Augustin came to the hotel with the 2 kids, both of them holding handwritten apology letters, both of them in tears. Bellatrix told me, in front of her father, that she was sorry, that her mother had told her on their last video call that I didn't really count, and that real parents are biological, that this was the speech her mother had been coaching her to deliver, that her mother had told her when Bellatrix called crying after we'd been kicked out that she was sure it would work out, that her mother had not been answering Bellatrix's calls since. The thing my stepdaughter had finally understood, in 2 days at her aunt's house, was which adult had actually been raising her. I hugged both of them in that hotel room, for a long time. We moved back into the house the following weekend. But here's the thing. Augustin found, 3 weeks later, going through his email, that Persephone had not actually been told Bellatrix this was a good idea, that Persephone had told Bellatrix she should ask her father about filing for full custody to move overseas with mom, that the speech at the kitchen table was step 1 of a plan Persephone had been workshopping with our stepdaughter for 4 months, that Persephone was planning to take both children out of the country permanently, that Persephone, when our family attorney pulled her recent travel history, had 3 tickets booked to a country with no extradition treaty for international custody disputes for 2 weeks from then. Augustin sat me down that same evening with his laptop open on the kitchen table, the same kitchen table where Bellatrix had given that speech. He turned the screen toward me and said, you need to read this, all of it. Persephone had been messaging Bellatrix through a secret email account, not the regular one, a separate one I had never seen, that had been active for 4 months. The messages were not what you'd expect. They were not sloppy or emotional. They were careful. They were step by step. Persephone had walked Bellatrix through exactly what to say to me, when to say it, how to bring Beauregard into it so it looked like both kids came up with it together. I sat there scrolling through message after message, and my hands were steady but my chest was not. One email, sent about 6 weeks before the kitchen table speech, said this: once your dad sees you don't want her there, he'll feel guilty. Then we talk about you coming to live with me. One step at a time, baby. I read that line 3 times, and I understood something I had not understood before. The speech at the kitchen table had never been about me. It was about creating a custody argument. It was about manufacturing a moment that Persephone could point to later and say, see, the children don't want to be there. They said so themselves. The whole thing had been a setup from the start. I called my attorney Franco that same night. I read him some of the emails. I told him about the 3 plane tickets Augustin had already found. Franco was quiet for a long time, and then he said, Magnolia, I need you to listen to me carefully. This is not a family disagreement anymore. If she has tickets to a non-extradition country and she's been coaching a minor to undermine undermine custodial authority. This is parental abduction planning. You need to move fast. He told me to get every email, every screenshot, every piece of evidence to him by morning. He said, do not wait on this. Do not assume she won't act before you're ready. I hung up the phone and looked at Augustin, and for the first time since all of this started, I saw something in his face that I had never seen before. He was scared. Augustin picked up his phone and called Persephone. She didn't answer. He sent her a text. I watched him type it. It said, I know about the tickets. Call me back tonight or I'm calling my lawyer in the morning. We sat in that kitchen for 3 hours waiting. 3 hours later, Persephone responded with a single line. They're my children too, Augustin. That was it. No explanation, no denial. Augustin showed me the text. His hands were shaking. He looked at me and said, she's not going to stop. And I looked right back at him and said, neither am I. The next morning, Franco pulled the full travel records. 3 one-way tickets, not round trip, booked 6 weeks before, which meant Persephone had been buying those tickets while she was still coaching Bellatrix on what to say to me at that kitchen table. The departure date was 11 days out. 11 days. Both children's passports were listed on the booking. I sat in Franco's office and I asked him the question that had been eating at me. I said, how did she get their passport information? We have the passports here. Franco looked at me and said, she's their biological mother. She was on the original applications. She has the numbers. I felt the floor tilt under me. I asked him, can she just take them? And Franco looked me in the eyes and said, if she gets them on that plane and lands in that country, yes, there is no mechanism to bring them back. I just sat there for a minute. No mechanism. Augustine and I filed an emergency motion that same day to restrict the children's travel. The judge granted a temporary hold within 48 hours. Both passports flagged. For about 5 minutes, I felt like I could breathe again. And then Franco called. Franco said, the hold is temporary. We need a full hearing, and I need to prepare you for something. Persephone's attorney is going to argue that the children expressed in writing that they wanted to be with their biological parents. That document your stepdaughter signed, she's going to use it. I went cold because I knew exactly what document he was talking about. The one I had asked Bellatrix and Beauregard to write. The one I had told them to sign by 6 p.m. I had asked for that document because I thought it was my shield. It was now a weapon. To a judge who had never met our family, who didn't know about the emails or the coaching, that document looked like 2 children making a clear, voluntary statement that they wanted their biological mother. The thing I had been most proud of, the moment I thought I had been the smartest person in the room, was now the single biggest threat to keeping those kids safe, and Persephone knew it. She had been counting on it. I sat with that for 2 days. I could not eat. I kept going back to the document. I pulled it out of the drawer and I read it again and again. We will only be answering to our biological parents. I asked them to write it. I told them to sign it. I stood in that kitchen and smiled while they did it because I thought I was being smart. Augustin found me at the kitchen counter one night just staring at the paper. He put his hand on my back and said, you couldn't have known. Bellatrix noticed something was wrong before I was ready for her to. It was a Tuesday evening. I heard her footsteps in the hallway and then she was just standing there in my bedroom doorway, 15 years old, still in her school clothes, watching me. Then she said it. You're scared. Not a question. A fact. I wanted to lie. I almost did. But instead I just said, I'm handling it. She walked in and sat down on the edge of my bed. Then she looked at me and said, my mom told me to write that stuff. I didn't mean it. You know I didn't mean it. Can't I just tell someone that? I looked at my stepdaughter sitting on my bed, 15 years old, asking me if her own words could be taken back. And something in my chest shifted, in the way it does when you realize the answer has been sitting right in front of you the whole time. I looked at her and said, that's actually exactly what we might need you to do. Franco called the next morning. He said he had been up most of the night going through the emails. He said, the document cuts both ways. Yes, it shows the children rejected your authority, but it also shows they were coached. If Bellatrix is willing to testify under oath that her mother fed her those words over 4 months of secret communication, and if you can produce the emails to back it up, the document becomes evidence of parental manipulation, not parental preference. He paused. Then he said, but the girl has to be willing, and she has to be steady. A 15-year-old on the stand is a risk. That afternoon, Augustine and I sat down with Bellatrix and Beauregard together. No lawyers in the room, just the 4 of us at the kitchen table. Augustine kept it simple. He told them their mother had booked plane tickets to take them to another country, that she had coached Bellatrix to give that speech at this very table as part of a bigger plan. He didn't raise his voice. Beauregard was sitting across from me. He had been quiet the whole time. Then he looked at his sister and said, she told Bella to say all that stuff? Bellatrix nodded. She was crying. Beauregard looked at me, 13 years old, and the look on his face was not confusion. It was fear. He said, are we going to have to leave? And I said, no, you are not going anywhere. That evening, Augustine's phone rang. It was Catalina. I was in the kitchen cleaning up, and Augustine answered on speaker because at that point we were past secrets. Catalina's voice was tight, like she was holding something in. She said, Persephone called me. Augustine didn't say anything. Catalina kept going. She said, she asked me if I would put the kids on a plane. She said you were being unreasonable and that the kids already said they didn't want to live with Magnolia. She offered me money. The kitchen went quiet. Augustine's voice went flat. He said, what did you say? Catalina said, I told her I would think about it because I wanted you to hear this from me. I looked at Augustine across that kitchen. This was not a custody disagreement anymore. Persephone was calling family members. She was offering money. She was trying to get someone, anyone, to physically put those children on a plane before a judge could stop her. She was desperate, and desperate people do not wait for court dates. Franco called 2 days later, and the second I heard his voice, I knew it was not good news. He said, Persephone has retained an attorney in the country she was planning to take the kids to. That attorney has already filed a custody claim in their local court over there. The filing says she's the children's primary caretaker, and that your husband's household is unstable. I had to put my hand on the wall. He kept going. He said, the filing specifically references, and I'm reading this to you directly, a non-biological adult exercising unauthorized parental control. That's you, Magnolia. She named you without naming you. I said, what does that mean for us? And Franco said, it means she's building a parallel case. If she gets the kids to that country, she doesn't even have to fight us here. She just points to this filing over there and says she already had legal standing. We need the hearing moved up now. We got the hearing moved up, but not by as much as we needed. They moved it up by 1 week, which still left us 5 days out. I stopped sleeping right. I started driving Bellatrix and Beauregard to school myself every morning. I was the one in the pickup line every afternoon. I did not let them walk to a friend's house, Beauregard noticed. One morning, getting out of the car, he looked at me and said, "Are you babysitting us now?" And I looked at him and said, "I'm making sure you get home safe." He held my eyes for a second. Then he said, "Okay," because somewhere in that 13-year-old brain, he understood that I was not being dramatic. I was being careful, and careful was the only thing keeping us together. 3 days before the hearing, my phone rang. I was in the kitchen, and the number was international. My thumb hovered over the screen for 3 full rings, and then I picked up. Persephone's voice came through, and it was nothing like what I expected. It was calm. It was warm. It sounded rehearsed. She said, "Magnolia, I know we've never really talked, just the two of us. I want you to know I don't blame you for any of this. You've done a beautiful job with my children, but they need their mother. You know that. You're a woman. You understand what it means to need your kids close. I'm asking you, mother to mother, let them come to me. I'll make sure they call you every week. I promise." I let her finish. I didn't interrupt. And when she was done, when the silence stretched out and she was waiting for me to fold, I said, "Persephone, you haven't paid a cent of child support in 6 years. You coached your daughter to humiliate me at my own kitchen table. You booked one-way tickets to a country where no court on earth could make you give them back. And now you're calling me, the woman you told your daughter doesn't count, and asking me to hand them over. The answer is no. And if you call my phone again, my attorney will add harassment to the filing." And I hung up. 2 days before the hearing, I was in the kitchen again. It was evening. Augustine was in the living room. And then Bellatrix came in. She was standing in the doorway, and I could see it on her face before she said a word. She was shaking. She looked at me and said, "Mom called me on the email. She said if I don't come with her, she won't talk to me anymore. She said I'm choosing you over her and she'll never forgive me." I stopped what I was doing. I put down the dish towel. I walked over to her and I pulled her close, and she let me. She just folded into me like she was 6 years old again, and she said into my shoulder, "I don't want to lose my mom." I held her tight, and I said, "You are not losing anyone. Your mother is making threats because she is scared, but you do not owe anyone your life because they are afraid of losing you. You are 15. This is not your job to fix." She cried into my shoulder. I just stood there and held her, and I didn't say anything else. And while I held her, I thought, this is what being a parent is. Not the title, not the paperwork, not the biology. It's standing in a kitchen at 8 p.m. holding a girl who is scared, and being the one who tells her that she doesn't owe either of them her whole self. After Bellatrix went to bed that night, I sat down at my laptop, and I pulled up the email she had told me about. She had given me the login weeks ago, and there it was. Persephone's message, threatening a 15-year-old girl with permanent silence if she didn't do what her mother wanted, during active litigation, through a secret account. I forwarded every bit of it to Franco. Franco called me back within the hour. He said, "She's contacting a minor through a secret account to pressure her during active litigation. This is going to matter. Print everything. We're ready." The morning of the hearing, I sat behind our attorneys with Augustine in a courtroom that smelled like old wood and floor cleaner. Augustine's knee was pressed against mine. Bellatrix and Beauregard were in a waiting room down the hall with Catalina. Persephone appeared on a screen at the front of the courtroom. Video from overseas, hair done, good lighting. Her attorney spoke first. He went straight for the document. He held up a copy and read it out loud to the judge. "We will only be answering to our biological parents." He said the children's own words should be honored. I sat there listening to my own idea being used as a weapon against me, and I kept my face still. Then Franco stood up. He picked up a folder, and he opened it, and he started reading. 4 months of emails, Persephone to Bellatrix. He read them slowly, one at a time. "Tell her she has no authority." Use those exact words. And then another one. "Once your dad sees you don't want her there, he'll feel guilty. Then we talk about you coming to live with me." And then another. "Don't tell your stepmom. Don't tell your dad. This is between us." The courtroom was quiet. Franco looked at the judge and said, "Your Honor, this document was not a child's authentic expression. It was a script, rehearsed over 4 months, delivered by a 15-year-old who believed she was helping her mother. The mother then used that manufactured statement to build a custody claim in a foreign jurisdiction while booking one-way tickets to a non-extradition country." Persephone's attorney objected. The judge overruled him without even looking up. Franco kept going. He put the travel records in front of the judge. He presented the overseas custody filing. He presented Catalina's sworn statement. He presented the final email Persephone had sent to Bellatrix 2 days ago. The judge asked to speak to Bellatrix. They brought her in. I watched my stepdaughter walk into that courtroom and sit down in a chair in front of a judge, and she folded her hands in her lap and lifted her chin, and she looked so much older than 15 in that moment. The judge asked her who she lived with. Bellatrix said, "My dad and my stepmom." He asked who took care of her day to day. She said, "Magnolia does. She always has." He asked about the speech at the kitchen table. Bellatrix's voice cracked. She said, "My mom told me what to say. She said if I didn't, she wouldn't talk to me anymore. I didn't want to say it. I'm sorry. I'm really sorry." And then she looked over her shoulder at me. I nodded, just once. She turned back to the judge and said, "Magnolia is my parent. She's the one who's here. She's always the one who's here." The judge ruled. Full travel restriction on both children's passports. Persephone's visitation suspended pending a full custody review. He noted, out loud, in his ruling, that the biological mother had engaged in a sustained campaign of parental alienation and attempted international abduction. He ordered supervised communication only, through the court, until further notice. Persephone's video feed disconnected. She didn't say a single word. Under the table, Augustine reached for my hand. He squeezed it. He didn't let go. That evening, back at the house, Beauregard dropped his backpack by the door and looked at me and said, "So, the locks are staying this time, right?" I laughed. The first real laugh in weeks. A few minutes later, Bellatrix came downstairs holding the apology letter she had written 3 weeks ago. She said, "I want to write a new one. The first one was about being sorry. This one is going to be about being grateful." I told her she didn't have to. She looked at me and said, "I know. That's why I want to." Later that night, Augustine found me on the back porch. He sat down beside me and said, "I should have been home more. I should have seen it. I am never going to let someone make you feel like you don't belong in this family again." I leaned into him. I said, "I never needed anyone to tell me I belong. I just needed them to stop telling me I don't." The house was quiet. The locks were new. The passports were flagged. 3 weeks later, a thick envelope arrived at the house from Franco. He had been doing one last sweep of Persephone's accounts as part of the custody review, and he wanted us to see what came back. The envelope contained a printout of one more secret email thread, dated from before Bellatrix was ever pulled into any of this. It was between Persephone and a name none of us recognized. The signature line at the bottom of every reply listed an address address in the same non-extradition country, and the subject line on the very first message, sent 11 months before the speech at the kitchen table, was 3 words: ready for delivery.